Hi everyone, Flaming Footy here and welcome back to another video on the channel. And today guys, here we are to do another AFL 2022 season review. And in today's season review, I'm going to be reviewing the Hawthorn Hawks 2022 AFL season. So of course, we're going to be continuing on with the same normal season review stuff that we do. But today it's Hawthorn's turn for a season review. Of course, they finished 13th. We're going in ladder order as to the ladder order which the teams finished in. And it was an okay season from Hawthorn. Bit disappointing at times, but also really good at times. Let's go ahead and see what's going to be in today's episode. So it is going to be recapping the season and the ladder position, highlights, best win, good players, lowlights, the worst loss, what's next, trade period, coach, and then the recap and the final words. So Hawthorn finished the 2022 AFL season in 13th with a record of 8-14, 8 wins, 14 losses, and a points of 32 with a percentage of 89.8. So Hawthorn had an interesting year, but I will tell you a little bit more about that later on in the video. But first of all, they got a nice 20-point win over the North Melbourne Footy Club in round 1 just to start off their season. And in round 2, they pulled off one of the shocks of the season. And at the end of the season, you can still see it's a bit of a shock, beating the Power by 64 at the Adelaide Oval, something that the Hawks were not tipped to do. And oh boy, they made a statement there. Round 3, they played a really good game with the Blues, lost by a point. Three very solid games to start off the season from a Hawks point of view. A game they were tipped to actually do well in against the Saints. They lost by 69. And then the week after, though, they managed to really regroup and do well against the Cats to win by 12. That was a massive Easter Monday win there. And then a disappointing loss to the Swans by 41 after choking a 32-point lead for the Hawks. And then a 10-point loss to the Demons, which they played pretty well in that one. And then a very disappointing loss to the Bombers to lose by 27. So up to this sort of point for the Hawks season, it was a bit up and down, bumpy. You couldn't really tell when they were going to compete or not in games. And then a disappointing loss to Richmond by 23 points, but then another really solid win at UTAS against the Lions. They've had some really good wins this season of the Hawks, and then they just got thumped by the Gold Coast Suns at TIO, not Metricon, TIO. And then they lost to the Pies in a thriller by 4 points. They played okay against the Dockers in Perth to go down by 13. They got smashed, absolutely beaten up by the Dogs by 42 points. They lost to the Giants by 22, beat the Crows by 32, beat the Eagles by 25, and then beat the Roos by 46. They got on a really nice 3-game winning streak there. And then they lost disappointingly, even though they only lost by 12 points. But man, they were out of that game for a long time. And they managed to come back into it to only lose by 12. They beat the Suns by 7 at UTAS. Lost to the Tigers by 61 in one of their worst games of the season. And then in round 23, fought hard for most of the day, but couldn't get enough scoring shots, losing to the Dogs by 23 points. So what I did want to say before I went into best win and worst loss is that Hawthorn had a few good wins, and I'm labelling a few against Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, 64-point win. Against the eventual premiers Geelong by 12 was another really strong win. And then against the Lions by 5. And then there was one more as well. No, there wasn't one more. So those were the really good wins they had in the season. They had some really good games, and there was 1, 2... and 3 wins that were really good against some really solid opponents, as in Port Adelaide, Brisbane, and Geelong. Now, Port Adelaide didn't end up being solid, but Geelong and Brisbane, those wins were exceptional, especially the one against the Cats. So that's why that is their best win of the season against the Cats by 12 points. Man, everything went into that game, and they played really well. Now, from a Hawthorn point of view, though, there were some very disappointing losses, though, in this season as well. A very disappointing loss to the Saints by 69. The Swans was a really devastating game as well, to lose by 41 points. But the Bombers, that was probably one of their worst losses. Not because of the margin, they only lost by 27, but the Bombers were one of the worst sides in the comp at that stage. So that was a devastating loss right there. And then to the Suns by 67. They got absolutely thumped. The Dogs by 42 was another example of that. But then, yeah, I reckon the last couple of rounds versus the Tigers and the Dogs, some top 8 quality teams. They just got thumped in those games. But yeah, worst loss, I'm going to be putting that one down to St Kilda. That one was a game that they really should have competed in way more than they did. They got absolutely thumped by 69 points. Worst loss of the year for sure. Hawthorn had quite a bumpy season. Some really quality wins, but some really poor losses. Now, one thing that I did notice when I was doing my 3-game match reviews in a fair few of their games actually was that Hawthorn were not getting enough scoring shots at goal. They were definitely not getting enough scoring shots. They were being accurate with some of the shots they had, e.g. 10-5, but they just weren't getting enough shots or inside 50s to get shots. And that's the only way they're going to win games. You've got to go inside 50 multiple times, have those repeat entries put on the pressure, because otherwise it's going to get thumped. Even that round 23 game versus the Western Bulldogs is a real good standpoint. If they had gone inside 50 more times, they would have won the game. They lost by 23. The Dogs scored about 15 behinds, and they scored about 4, I think. So it was really disappointing for the Hawks because they're not getting enough entries. So something that they need to look to do in this trade period is bolster their forward line. And that's not going to be happening with Jack Gunston going out the door. In fact, are they going to get even more scoring shots next year? Probably not. So they're going to have to look for a key forward. And look, the trade period, it can go really wonky. You don't know. Deals are going to be popping up that we haven't even heard of yet to this stage. But yeah, Jack Gunston going out is a massive concern for the Hawks. Carl Amon is coming in, which is going to be nice for their group, but he's not going to be able to add anything to the forward line. So I think they do need to look at the forward line to get more shots on goal, because that's where they've been ultimately disappointing in the season. Their defence as well can be a little bit not so great at times too. Carl Hartigan going out is a bit of a disappointment for the Hawks. And yeah, last year they looked to have a bit of a sale. They're looking to do this again this year with Tom Mitchell going out. I think they're going through a rebuild right now. I do genuinely think Hawthorn need to rebuild because, look, they've done the draft pretty well, but they're going to have to wait a little bit of time and just re-bolster this list to get a bit more strength into it, because at the moment it's not looking like the best list that Hawthorn have had. And I feel like they're going to be, I don't think they're going to really necessarily enter the bottom 4, but I don't think they're going to have a breakout year where they can really attempt to try and re-go at the top 8 again. I think they're going to be, I reckon, next year, early cool. I reckon they're going to slide a couple of positions, maybe down to 14th, I reckon. Go down one position. But, yeah, I do feel like they just need a little bit of a refresh of this list. So, a disappointing season for the Hawthorn Hawks. Well, a decent season. They finished 13th in the end, had some really, really, really quality wins, but also some poor losses. So, rocky season for the Hawks. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Send you guys never miss another video on the channel. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Bye everyone. Flaming Footy out.